Great. Well, hi everyone, and thank you all for joining us today for our 2021 tech predictions. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Javed Haq, and I'm a director here at GP Bullhound, and I head up our Manchester office. I'm joined this afternoon by my colleague Ed Pryor, who works alongside me here in Manchester, and to add some West Coast flair to the presentation by my colleague Brandon Overmeyer, who's director in our San Francisco office and one of the key authors of the report. We're also delighted to have a couple of fantastic guest speakers with us who've kindly agreed to give up their time to provide us some real life insight into a couple of our predictions. So I'd like to give a massive thank you to Wais Shaifta from Push Doctor and Chris Slater, the CEO of Sanctus, who you'll be hearing from later on in the presentation. Before we get started, we'd obviously love to hear from you. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please submit them through the Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen, and we will try to address as many of those as possible at the end. And so we'll try not to take up more than an hour of your time, and the webinar is being recorded. So we will send you a link of the recording over the next couple of days. Before we get started, I just want to give you a quick introduction to GP Bullhound. Many of you on the call today will obviously know about us. For those of you who don't and are joining us for the first time, we at GP Bullhound are Europe's largest technology-focused investment bank. We were founded about 20 years ago and have grown to over 100 people in 10 offices located here in Europe, also in the US and in Hong Kong. And our mission is really to help play our part in helping entrepreneurs build successful technology companies. And we do that in four main ways. We write lots of research on the technology sector and host events, much like the one that you're joining today. We advise entrepreneurs on raising growth equity for their businesses. Typically, those sort of breakout rounds of, say, 20 million pounds, euros, dollars, and above, depending on where we are in the world. We help our clients to exit their businesses by helping them sell them to notably, the big US consolidators like Apple, Google, and Amazon. And then finally, we invest our own money and our clients' money and institutional money into lots of exciting companies around the world, such as Spotify, Slack, and Unity. Just to give you a flavor of some of the deals that we've worked on over the last year or so, I'm not going to do all of these one by one, but some of the ones that really caught our attention and our imagination were the growth investment into EcoVadis by CVC Growth. This was the largest enterprise software equity raise in France to date, and was a really exciting transaction in the ESG space for us. Out of the Manchester office, we were lucky enough to advise on an amazing autonomous driving software company called Oxbotica, where we helped them raise 50 million of growth equity in a round led by BP Ventures. In the US, Brandon and his team advised Customer Thermometer on its sale to Exclaimer, which is a UK-based business backed by Insight Partners. And finally, to pick one, we invested in Revolut and in Busuu, the language learning platform in Spain. So moving on to the next slide, one thing the team likes to do every year is to mark our own homework on the predictions from the previous year. Normally we get about 7 or 8 of our predictions right, but last year the guys were obviously on point and they did a lot better. So again, I won't go into all of these in detail, but there are a few that I wanted to point out in particular. The first one was the war in streaming film. It clearly went crazy last year. Nobody predicted what was going to happen with respect to COVID-19. But this trend started to pick up steam as early as January 2020, with a range of high-profile funding rounds, high-profile acquisitions, and the platforms launching their own online streaming platforms, most notably Disney, Apple, HBO, and ESPN in the US. What's also interesting to see is that consumers have really been adopting a multi-platform approach here, whereby they're willing to pay for multiple services across premium content. So it does not appear that this is going to be a winner-takes-all arena in the future. A second trend, which is quite closely linked to this one, is in the gaming space, and that's that prediction 6 was that gaming was going to be embracing an era of subscription and streamings. And this trend was also buoyed by COVID, obviously, but what was really interesting to see companies like PlayStation surpassing 50 million subscribers in a very short space of time, and Xbox also managed to reach 15 million subscribers, which was a 50% increase on the previous year. This trend is quite closely linked to our 10th trend, which was everything would become a service. And then during 2020, Dell announced that it was moving all of its products to an as-service model. in recognition that IT spending is transitioning from CapEx to OpEx, and businesses need a better agile solution in order to address their needs. And then on the consumer side, we've literally seen everything turn into as a service across all sorts of verticals, including fitness and healthcare and communication. And then one of the more technical predictions we made last year was around the edge of tomorrow and how edge computing was going to become more prevalent as the amount of data being transmitted and consumed on 5G enabled devices began to take hold. What we saw last year was that large players such as Google Cloud really increased their bets on edge computing, and they partnered with over 200 developers to make edge computing possible in parallel with the rollout of 5G technologies that they were seeing. Companies like Red Hat also recently built native edge computing features into its software, all of which are continued trends that we're going to see going forward. And then finally, one prediction which we're not quite entirely right on was our prediction that relational databases were going to make way for data lakes. Specifically, our prediction was that data lakes were going to start replacing relational databases. However, whilst data lakes are clearly a much superior product, and we do expect them to become increasingly prominent going forward, the method for storing data has continued to be around relational databases, as this continues to be an important component for organizations, and will continue to be so for the foreseeable future. So now turning to our trends for 2021. The first trend I wanted to cover is the shift that we're seeing in consumers wanting to better understand what data is that's out there on them and what they can do in order to better control their privacy. So companies have historically been collecting huge amounts of personal data on us in order to provide a really personalized experience. And I guess the dilemma we've had in the past couple of years is, well, how much data do we want these companies to be collecting on us, and how much of a personalized experience do we actually want to be getting? I'm sure that many of you have had almost overbearingly personalized ads on Google and Instagram, or even website banners, which sometimes make you pause and think whether the devices that you use are actually listening to you. Regulation has obviously been introduced through GDPR and through CCPA in America, which has required technology companies to obtain explicit consent from users prior to obtaining personal data. However, these policies have not completely eliminated data privacy violations, as evidenced by the large fines that have been levied out onto companies like Google and to Facebook. And as a result, what we're seeing is that many users are starting to really question what information they're willing to give up in order to receive such personalization. And they're actually starting to pull back from wanting to have those personalized experiences as a result. The knock-on effect on this is that we're seeing many companies now looking to really differentiate themselves by becoming privacy first. So Google itself announced last year that it would no longer use cookies to track web browsing activities. And only this month, they confirmed that they're not going to build any sort of other technology to replace the cookie or build any features inside Chrome, which would allow itself to access to that data. Additionally, we also saw that Apple, with its release of iOS 14, is enabling users to opt out of app tracking. And they've also added privacy labels to the app stores so that all users can see what data those apps would be collecting on them. With respect to some of the companies that we've seen recently doing some really cool stuff in the space, we met with an amazing business last year, which gives consumers the ability to find out what personal information companies hold on them and then request that that data is deleted. And those companies then by law would have to act on that deletion request within 30 days. And what's even more scary about this company is that they also have the ability to help consumers find out where and when their data has been misheld, and that data then leaks onto the dark web so that you can make claims against companies which have allowed those data breaches to happen. As a firm, we've also invested in a business called DuckDuckGo, which is an internet search platform that enables, it really emphasizes users' protection and privacy and avoids the filter bubble of personalized search results. So what you get as a result is that everybody gets the same search results if they type in the same ad, whereas clearly with the Google algorithm at the minute, depending on your search history and your search preferences, you'll be served certain results based on the search term that you enter into Google. So moving on to the second trend which I wanted to cover today, which is the education in the 21st century. So COVID has obviously had a massive impact on education over the past 12 months. We've seen 90% of countries implementing remote learning policies. And I'm sure that many of you on the call here today have had the challenges of dealing with homeschooling, plus also trying to focus on the day job. And I commend you all for having to do that. E-learning was probably already starting to build momentum prior to the pandemic, but we think this trend has been accelerated by about 5 to 10 years as a result of COVID. And whilst e-learning usage has increased, there's also been an unbelievable influx of capital into the space, with over $8 billion being invested in the first 3 quarters of 2020. And I actually checked the data today, and that last quarter of 2020 saw another $8 billion go into the sector. So there's a total of $16 billion which was invested into e-learning and edtech last year alone. What we believe is that as governments continue to struggle with the way in which they're going to bring students back to the classroom, there's going to be a real continued shift towards technology-based learning platforms, particularly as each subsequent generation becomes more and more technology savvy. Unfortunately, for some students, the idea of my dog eating my homework is no longer going to be a valid excuse. Technology companies have been using some really innovative ways to improve the learning experience. So for example, in India, you've got a company called Biju, which has created personalized learning programs for children, which is all based upon their proficiency. So depending on how good they are at learning and how well they can progress through the learning syllabus, students can therefore, develop at their own pace. And, in the US, companies like Vooks have, introduced gaming into their educational materials in order to motivate students and bring that competition between students so that they enhance their learning experience as quickly as they possibly can. What I think is great about this trend is that locally we've got a huge number of companies who are, delivering some really innovative experiences for students in the edtech space. So for example, you've got a company called Twinkle, which is based in Sheffield. And what they do is they help teachers with lesson planning, assessment materials, and teaching resources. On the adult side, you've got ICS Learn, which is based in Glasgow, and they provide an extensive range of professional courses and supplementary courses to A-levels and GCSE students. And then on the infrastructure side, you've got a company called BTL Group based in Shipley in Yorkshire. Those guys provide the underlying platform, which is used to develop and deliver online tests for universities and government bodies around the world. So it enables tests to be delivered in a secure manner whilst not being done in a proper testing environment. Moving on to the third trend, which I wanted to cover today, which is the new patient-doctor relationship. Whilst there have been numerous companies in recent years which have been trying to revolutionize the way in which we seek healthcare, it's really taken this global pandemic for us to really shift our mindset and how we want to receive that healthcare. In some ways, as Brandon's mentioned in the past in previous presentations, we've gone backwards in a positive way, in the sense that we've effectively brought back the house call from years ago, where the doctor would actually visit you at home. Nowadays, what we have instead is telemedicine, where you can visit your doctor on demand from the comfort of your own home. And then what you can do is you can share pictures and videos or whatever might help in order to describe your symptoms. And patients also understand that they're able to receive a certain types of care in a more safe and efficient manner, rather than going out to their doctor's surgery and sitting in waiting rooms alongside other ill patients. One of the other great things that we find about this trend is that it's going to help restore access to parts of the population which have historically been underserved by healthcare infrastructure. So for example, if you live in remote areas, rather than having to travel large distances in order to get to a doctor's appointment, you'll be able to attend those appointments remotely, which will obviously have a much better impact on people's health and livelihoods. On the more techie side, we expect some really cool developments to further advance the quality of telehealth. So for example, as more routine checkups are being carried out over video or phone, we expect conversational AI to be increasingly adopted to answer patients' questions and help with scheduling without the need for much staff support. Additionally, as the adoption of 5G becomes more widespread, we believe that the more serious or sensitive healthcare conversations could also start to take place over video, as people are more able to share higher quality imagery with their doctors. And again, here in this trend, there are some fantastic businesses around Europe trying to address this market. And as I mentioned before, we're very pleased to have Wais Shaifta from PushDoctor, who's based here in Manchester, And he's very kindly agreed to tell us a little bit more about his business and about how Push Doctor is capitalizing on this trend. Wais, over to you.
Thank you very much, Javed, and thank you very much for the introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. So as Javed mentioned, I am Wais. I am the CEO of Push Doctor. Um, so ultimately at Push Doctor, we are a solution for an integrated digital healthcare ecosystem. And I'll touch on that a bit later on in a bit more detail. But the patient-doctor relationship, of course, is ever changing. So just a bit about us. So our mission is to provide an integrated end-to-end digital experience for patients and clinicians. So just a few snapshots on us. We are the UK's largest telemedicine partner for the NHS. We serve over 5.5 million patients. We're contracted with over 500 GP practices and 8 hospitals. We have strategic partnerships within the pharmacy, physio, mental health space. We have a first-of-type API layer, which we have built in partnership with the NHS digital team, which allows seamless data sharing of patients' data, which again, I'll touch on a little later on. We are the safest and highest rated provider by the regulator in the space. And our platform also is available to private patients, but predominantly the majority of our work is with the NHS. Next slide, please, Frenta. So as Javid alluded to in previously, so there has been a massive shift, particularly within the NHS, on moving consultations from traditional face-to-face to remote. And if we look at January 2020, we saw circa 20% of consultations being remote. And we've seen an over 200% growth in going to an overall 44% going remote. What was very interesting through the number of lockdowns that we have gone through is there were numerous weeks and months actually at some point where all consultations were digital. And it was just a fascinating time to really see how our partners in the NHS and the wider NHS were adopting these digital technologies. It's just absolutely fascinating being a partner to the NHS to help in that adoption. We're talking historically about an institution which is heavily analog and literally overnight had to digitalize. So being part of that journey for us has been absolutely phenomenal. And a trend that we have seen, so kind of a simple growth spur from a Push Doctor perspective, we have seen a year-on-year growth of 300%. We see circa month-on-month growth of 30%. And what we've seen through the past couple of months and the trends that we see is the pivot and the shift to remote has happened, and it continues to stay. And I think one of the responsibilities for ourselves and other digital providers in the space today is how do we continue that shift in a safe and secure way to get not only patients comfortable in being able to have consultations this way, but clinicians behind the scenes also comfortable in doing consultations while upholding the highest levels of data security and patient confidentiality. Next slide, please. So at a high level, this is a snapshot of our products. So on the left-hand side, you have the clinician-facing app. We call the product Push Consult, and that's a product that we provide our clinicians to do the consultations. And on the right-hand side, you have the Push Doctor app, which is our patient-facing app, which ultimately the patients will consult and book appointments through. And just a high overview. So telemedicine video consultations is the bulk of what we do. It is the preferred method of consultations by our patients, but we have a number of other solutions for our patients. So predominantly the first focus of Push Doctor is triaging patients and giving them instant access to the right care at the right time. So if I think very, very simply about a mental health condition, if you have depression or some form of mental health issue, primarily the path today would be phoning your receptionist, seeing a GP, and a GP having to refer you. Our whole model is built heavily on that. That is quite inefficient. Your GP isn't a mental health specialist. How do we get you to a mental health specialist fast and the right type of clinician as opposed to a GP? We give instant access to quality clinicians across the setting. So it's not only a GP. You have mental health specialists, practitioners, physios, pharmacists, nurse practitioners, etc. And the key point which makes Push Doctor different in the space to our competitors and others in the space is the clinicians behind the scene via the Push Consult app have real-time access to patient medical records, naturally, of course, through the consent of the patient, with the ability to read, write, refer, and prescribe. So that experience that you get within a GP practice when you see that clinician, they of course have access to your medical records, but now through your mental health specialist, through your physician, physios, through your pharmacist, they also have that level of access, and they could not only update that in real time and make the whole system a bit more, make it a bit more integrated, but ultimately it's a safer method of care. If you think your mental health specialist now has access to your full healthcare record, the ability to update that, it really helps every single clinician who has seen you be able to consult with you a lot more safely. So next slide, please. At a very, very high level, so I say a very high level, this slide has a lot of detail, but on the crux of it, this is how it all comes together. So the focus is getting the right type of care at a first instance and arming the clinician behind the scenes to be able to have all the information to hand to consult with you safely. So typically what will happen in a journey is a patient will download the app. They'll talk about some of their symptoms. If it's a muscular pain, they'll talk about some of their muscular pain. They'll then be referred. They'll have the opportunity to book the appointment instantly. We'll learn through the line of questioning what type of clinician they'll need. They'll go to that mental health specialist. They can have the consultation to their choice. So it can be face-to-face, it can be via phone, it can be video consultations. We find in most cases they choose video consultations or face-to-face. Chat and phone is there, but they usually prefer those two methods. And ultimately the clinician behind the scene has access, the ability to read, write, refer, prescribe, etc. Everything that a clinician needs to effectively consult with a patient. Next slide, please, Frenza. Simple example here. This is just bringing the app to life. So part of that triage and structured questioning, you'll have all of these to hand. You'll talk about the problems that you have. You'll put some more information. You'll then ultimately book the appointment for a time that works for you. And then you'll ultimately choose a type of consultation you'll have. And Push Consult. So I probably won't go into too much detail on this, but this is a snapshot of the app. So typically we give the patient the opportunity to share, to do it via video, phone, other tools. Some patients also like to only have voice only and take the video out. Of course, totally down to the patient on what they want to do. But it's a single platform for all clinicians across different healthcare settings and primary care, secondary care, and tertiary care, enabling all healthcare professionals to consult remotely. Our first of type NHS integrations allow and it is a key part, it allows authorized clinical staff to share and view GP practice clinical data between IT systems. They have full access to the GP records. They have the ability to send it back. But ultimately, the thing that excites us most about this is it is throughout the whole healthcare setting, it is given that consistency of care and that opportunity to really unify the ecosystem, as opposed to having your GP surgery being the bottleneck for that. And what makes that available is our Apollo platform. So probably trying to not to go into too much detail on this, but within the NHS there is, as actually all healthcare systems across the globe, they heavily work in silo, and having integration between primary care, secondary care, and tertiary care is a challenge. And there are a number of different clinical systems which operate in those areas. Now, of course, all those clinical systems tend to not speak to one another, which ultimately means there's a number of different ways of getting medical records updated. It can be via post, it can be via PDF, et cetera, et cetera. That administrative burden costs the NHS billions of pounds per annum to uphold through administrative resources. So, and that's one part of it. The other part of it was, these clinical systems do not talk to each other. And actually the market at one point was heavily created in such a way to not share, to have closed APIs. And the NHS team within NHS Excellent Digital empowered a full open API with all these clinical systems. And ultimately what Apollo is a data layer which sits on top of every single clinical system within the NHS. So whether it be within primary care, secondary care, and tertiary care, this API layer sits on top of that. And that ultimately allows data to be crawled, allows data to be shared, etc. And of course, all of this is through patient consent. But for us, what gets us very, very excited, and I think what COVID, similar to the edtech market, what it's naturally done for the healthcare market, it has really created this, this it's really created the market to spearhead this 5-10 years as opposed to what it was before. Of course, the sector had to literally overnight become digital, but this has allowed, you know, questions around data share and around who has access and how this is done. It's really allowed this to become at the forefront of the NHS. Now, there's a lot of things we need to ensure are done correctly. Of course, there's a lot of policy and guidelines behind this, which we're working with policy on. But of course, being able to do this is very exciting for us. And on a final slide, and what this does allow us to do, and it goes back to my point earlier around a single integrated health ecosystem for both patients and clinicians. You know, we hear a lot of phrases in healthcare around wanting patients to live longer, healthier, happier lives. We talk about prevention is cure. The reason those things are somewhat of a challenge is, you know, the clinicians behind the scenes, with all the clinical systems that they use, they're not fully integrated, so they're not able to be armed with all the information that they have to consult with you. And you know, with our products, we have our Push Consult product, which is underlaid by the Apollo layer, but it gives the clinicians in any healthcare setting the ability to access that crucial information. Of course, from a patient's perspective, you can download the app, you can go through this journey, and it will allow you to be seen at a time which is convenient to you, but ultimately the right type of clinician. And all of this is underpinned by Apollo. And the exciting piece that we've been able to get into, particularly in the last year, is we've been able to partner with pharmacists. So we've got partnerships with World Pharmacy, a few others which we're going to announce shortly. We've got partnerships with those in mental health, IESA, Silver Cloud. We've got physios, but all these partnerships that we have across primary care, secondary care, and tertiary care have all now been fully integrated under the Apollo layer, where all of these clinicians and all of these patients which are around these settings have an instant update on all of their records in real time. And the future for us, ultimately, we have focused heavily on demand management to start off with. So we've gone heavily with demand is huge, demand is massive. How do we get people to the right type of care? But as Javid mentioned, where we really want to get to following this and using all the data to our hands is then how do we use all these AI platforms, AI tools to integrate with our product to allow patients to be consulted a lot more safely and a lot more efficiently. You know, that's all coming, and the next 5 years is naturally spearheaded that. But for us, the focus right now is heavily on demand. A shared vision that we have with the NHS and with the Apollo layer is ultimately let's focus on integration within the NHS. Let's focus on bringing primary care, secondary care, and tertiary care fully integrated. But ultimately, where that would move to is then looking at your private healthcare insurers, looking at your Apple healthcare data, amongst others, and really getting this single point of access for a patient, patient's data point for not only for a patient, but also any clinician who is consulted. So that's Push Doctor in a nutshell. I think naturally, as Javid mentioned, there is a huge shift in this space. We have seen the trend dramatically change, and actually the adoption of digital technology has never been higher. We are seeing plans in the next couple of instantaneously for the next couple of years on how every single practice, every single hospital has these kind of options for patients. And actually, of course, one thing COVID has done is it spearheaded that a lot more quicker than previously anticipated. And that is all from me.
Thanks, Wais. Brandon Overmeyer here. I'd like to take you through the next few of our predictions for 2021. So the first is MarTech kind of going all in on customer experience. So what we've seen, customer experience is it's really increasingly critical for companies to differentiate themselves. You can think of it almost as an extension of the product itself. You know, companies that are succeeding best at delivering these personalized experiences, you know, are based on a foundation of integrating both kind of marketing data as well as the experience technology, or the experience that powers technology. And you know, what we've seen is, you know, a number of these transformation efforts just bringing, you know, real tangible benefits to organizations. So if you think along the lines, if you're a startup company or even a well-established one, increasing, customer attention, and also increasing greater or providing greater opportunities for cross-sell and upsell of new products and new experiences. And so, some of this technology has been around. There's been marketing technology, traditional stacks for several years. But what we're really seeing is kind of a unification between, that traditional MarTech stack and the companies that are looking to, really have a more complete picture of their customers, unifying data from across e-commerce transactions, their CRM, social media, mobile apps, and also, behavior on websites and mobile apps. One of the interesting, I think, benchmarks here is, companies that would think of themselves as, very advanced in terms of consumer experiences, they have a 3 times greater probability of reaching their profit goals from a company perspective. And, companies that, consider themselves kind of leaders in customer experience, they tend to have this highly integrated marketing stack. So not, this isn't a new thing that they've just gotten into. Many of the, kind of the large traditional marketing experience cloud vendors, so think Adobe, Oracle, Salesforce, SAP, all have released customer data platforms in this past year. And we expect to see this market, be north of $10 billion over the next 5 years. And, I'd say overall, we forecast this to continue. We'd see, more and more consolidation of these kind of legacy providers and the new customer experience kind of point solutions and new ways of reaching customers and understanding them. And you can see some of the players that we highlighted below. We worked on a deal called Partnerize, which received a significant investment from Excel KKR. Talkwalker is another one. And as you probably are aware of, Sprout Social and Salesforce, these are really effective tools in reaching the customer. Moving on to the next prediction, kind of piggybacking off a separate report that we published in November of last year. Our main thesis is that we're beginning to see online games and online gaming migrate really toward a social network itself. So if you have kids, I'm sure you're acutely aware of the ways that this generation is playing games. They may sit in the same room or separate rooms at home. You may have 3 or your child and 3 others that are all playing on their handhelds or an Xbox or a PlayStation, playing games like Fortnite, Roblox, all at the same time. Some might be on an iPad, some might be on a phone. And so the entire time, they're actually engaging with each other through the game. So they may be sitting 5 feet away, but they're actually engaging with one another through the game. And if you think about, kind of with the trends that are driving this, if you look at COVID, as a kind of a forcing function here with, limited in-person access to see your closest friends and loved ones, instead of just giving a call, you might say, hey, let's hop on Fortnite or Call of Duty or Animal Crossing. Any number of those. And so, in addition to that, obviously the adoption of mobile phones, we're seeing mobile phones in an ever younger generation of the youth. And, in-game communication is really, even better than it's ever been. So obviously we've had, things like FaceTime and Google Duo. But now you're seeing some of the platforms, Fortnite in particular, which is now open for video chat while you're playing. So it's really interesting. And also from the cross-platform perspective, if you're at all into gaming, this will ring true to you. But, historically, we've been siloed. If you're, playing something on an Xbox, you can only, interact with others that are playing that same game on an Xbox. Whereas now, if you're on a PC, if you're on a mobile phone, an iPhone or an Android device, you could be playing Fortnite along with people that are on a PlayStation. So we do believe that there's this convergence of games and gaming becoming really another form of social network of the future for the younger generation. And we're really already seeing this happen now. Moving on to the next prediction, this one's really interesting. It's related to what I was just speaking about. If you really think about it, so Epic obviously is the maker of Fortnite, which I mentioned in the last prediction. And Fortnite's kind of premise is called Battle Royale. So what we think of this as now Epic is in a Battle Royale, with Apple, among others. So this is one I will tell you is unfolding in real time. And we're seeing basically the background on this is Apple and Google both have a virtual stranglehold. I mean, they've created these immense distribution platforms for apps, and they're really the exclusive way at distributing apps and experiences on mobile devices. And so how do they do this? Well, they're certainly taking a piece of the profits. So initially, when games were pay per download and things along those lines, it made sense. It said, hey, give Apple 30% of your $2 app, or give Google 30% of your $4.99 app. And that had worked quite well. It was a one size fits all solution. But now, as we've moved to new experiences, particularly with the rise of consumer subscription, that one size fits all approach really isn't working. And so Epic basically tried to force Apple's hand here and came up with a way to get around, basically charging, taking revenue basically from the customers willingly, the customers willingly wanting to buy, upgraded experiences on Fortnite, but not having to pay the Apple tax. And so this really came to a head last year when Epic, Apple actually retaliated by kicking Epic off the App Store. Epic filed a lawsuit against Apple. Tim Cook, is going to be sitting for a 7-hour deposition coming up in May. The trial should be in August. And it doesn't stop there. So Google has brought in other players, even the likes of Match.com and things along those lines that for example, if you want to sign up for a Spotify or a Netflix subscription, it's a bit different if you do it on the web and if you do it through your device. And so what we're really seeing is a fight for kind of the consumer here, as well as the innovation on the actual app developers. And if you really think about this, it's really interesting side for Apple to be on. If you go back to that 1984 commercial where Apple was, kind of portraying IBM as the big evil brother, they've kind of flipped that on its head now. So Epic is now saying, hey, Apple is this, kind of big brother that's trying to take too much of the revenue. And so we've seen a couple changes recently. Apple has introduced a new plan that basically, aims to protect developers that are grossing less than $1 million a year by dropping that commission to 15%. But ultimately, we've also seen, by the way, over the past couple of days, more has happened on this. So there's been in the U.S. various state laws. Arizona has a law that that actually passed, has not been signed into law, but would actually exempt developers after a certain amount of user signups from having to pay the Apple tax. And then Epic recently filed an antitrust suit in the EU. So this is happening on a global level, and there is a lot more to come. So stay tuned on that. Moving on to our prediction around fitness. This one's really critical, and I'm sure this touches home for a lot of folks. And I want to start by saying this isn't just kind of the gym dynamic, although that's certainly a particular part of it, but also it's health in general. So that's physical health, mental health. It really extends across the spectrum. But obviously, as many people noticed, over the past year, connected fitness has had really a boom year. Consumer adoption has accelerated due to COVID-19. A lot of the challenges that face traditional gyms with operating, around their, restrictions, across the world has really just pushed this trend even further. But many people, I think, are asking, is this a 1-year bump? And are we just going to return to gyms just like we did before in large groups in the future? I think our research shows that it's connected fitness and kind of subscription and things around this ecosystem have been growing already extensively over the last 5 years before COVID. So it's primarily been wearables like an Apple Watch, or social features like Strava or Nike Run, and to really just enhance that experience at the core. So what this has done is it's allowed for connected fitness to not just be a replacement, but really an improvement over the traditional gym experience. And consumer adoption is just really significantly expanding these businesses' profiles. Like you can look at Peloton, there are many others, Tonal, and also I would say the investor universe is definitely taking note. Just a couple, Swift, raised a large round from KKR. Strava raised 200 million from TCV. Surfline is a really interesting one, partnered with Sherman Group to really enhance their subscription. So we think this space is going to continue to be hot. It's not a one-time bump. It's not just going to go back to normal. But these are ways in which we are going to work out, remain fit on both a physical and mental health perspective going forward. And we expect many more deals in this industry to, kind of continue to track along the user growth. And look, I'm personally excited, to see the future of this category as well. So now I'd like to introduce a very important guest, Chris Slater, who's the CEO of Sanctus. Chris is an entrepreneur and business leader with a extensive background building businesses, delivering exceptional human success stories, and he was recently appointed as the CEO of Sanctus, which is a mental health business, which is really on a mission to provide quality mental health support for everyone, but with a interesting kind of focus on the workplace. So prior to this, Chris was he had co-founded Simply Business, which was Sunday Times best company to work for in 2015 and 2016, and exited that business in 2017 to spend a few years on boards of advising a number of businesses, including Zudo, Young Enterprise, while also building 53 Degrees Capital, which is an early stage investment vehicle aimed at in the impact space, which is also just wonderful. Chris devotes much of his free time, I would say, to social ventures, improving the lives of children, and on a personal level, I've heard that he's exceptionally talented at crafting really good, memorable, good night stories for his children. So Chris, let me pass it to you.
Thanks, Brandon. What an introduction, and thanks for having me here today, team. Really interesting jump-off point in terms of what you were talking about from a sort of community base and the investments going into the physical and mental health space. I think for me, recently joining Sanctus 3 months in, our mission is really to build a community to help people get access to quality mental health support. And what does that mean? Well, even the term mental health and the stigma that is surrounded around that, with the perception that it's very much from a sort of treatment perspective, our mission really is to democratize access to mental health support. We've all, seen our friends and experience of mental health, and we're very much trying to create a brand that is aspirational, that allows people to think about working on their mental health as they would their physical health. And in terms of the vision for that, that's sort of manifested for us on the next slide, Francis, in terms of, giving access to mental health through providing a gym. Our sort of mission is sort of aligned around giving people the access to work on their mental health as they would their physical health, and that movement is really happening now. There's been a proliferation of sort of online apps, and I'm sort of here as a counterpoint, I guess, to talk about the sort of human first approach that we're putting within the business. The likes of Headspace, the likes of Calm have really opened the door for a global awareness of our mental health. And what we're now starting to see, and we're seeing through the business that we're building, is really this sort of second version, this sort of mental health 2.0, this much deeper desire for consumers to work on their mental health, to really start to focus on what makes us all better aspirationally, not just about the treatment aspects, not just about the depression, not just about it is about wanting us to make ourselves better people. And the experience and environment, if we move on to the next slide, of what we've been living through for the last 12 months, I think we're still yet to see, I think, the repercussions of what the last 12 months has impacted on the global mental health. And in terms of some of the data around the impact that it's already had on people, there's stats around the increased working days that we're putting in, the cost to businesses, and in terms of like the anxiety that we're all feeling, certainly as a parent having kids at home, the challenges that have been presented to us have been new, unfounded, and new challenges are still to face us, I think, in the ecosystem. So in terms of here at Sanctus, just next slide, Franz. The movement that we've been creating has been in place for the last 5 years, really born out of the two co-founders' own mental health challenges and the inaccessibility really for mental health solutions. The opportunity to work on ourselves and think about how do we help ourselves. And very early we were pulled into businesses really to help businesses provide employees with a sort of cornerstone product, which is a one-to-one coaching product, creating that safe space, creating that environment, that opportunity for all employees to be able to work on themselves. And we've seen steady and consistent growth over the time, and now really returning back this year as we've seen the demand from our community to really work on a B2C basis. We, as of the beginning of this year, have got a virtual gym timetable that's now live, and I'd invite anyone to come down to one of our classes and really start to open our senses and awareness of through whether it's journaling, whether it's dance, whether it's meditation. For me, the trend that you've talked to, Brandon, earlier around the likes of Peloton, where in the past it's been a very sort of solitary and individual working on our physical health and indeed our mental health, it's been very sort of isolated and individual. What we're seeing is much more a community type model starting to come through, enabled by technology, allowing access to people that otherwise wouldn't have access to it. I feel like I've had the privilege over the last 10 years of being in an executive suite where I've had access to coaching on a one-to-one basis. And what we're here to do is to try and democratize and give access to many more people to high and quality offerings. Just move on to the next slide, please. So to what Brandon said, we're very much embedded within the workplace, trying to change the narrative in the workplace around mental health, make people more aware of it, make people more acceptable to talk about our mental health, and the benefits of that for employers in terms of attracting talent, better employee happiness, and really just about creating a better culture for people to be able to connect and be productive, be that at home or at work. Next slide, please. So what do we do? We're effectively providing the sort of personal trainer for your mental health. At the moment, very much in the heart of it is our marquee product around coaching, where we provide a coach into businesses. But alongside that, we're also providing many more opportunities through EAP, therapy integrations, counseling services, one-to-many type products. All currently, we've had to move virtual, obviously, over the last 12 months. And what we've seen is that giving ourselves the opportunity to reach people on a much more accessible basis. And just mindful of time and giving time for questions, just on the next couple of slides. So where do we sit in the mental health space? There's a real proliferation, and I think we'll see more and more people coming into this space. For us, it's about creating a brand that holds a very high bar for the types of quality opportunities for people to work on, and making it aspirational, making us think that we can talk to our friends about working on what we do, and being very much in that sort of preventative, proactive space. Wais talked earlier about the integrations he's got with Push Doctor. For us, it's very much operating in the 90% space of, you heard stats of 1 in 5 people suffering with their mental health. For us, we see it very much, I see it very much as it's 5 of 5. We all have mental health, so let's all work on it on an ongoing basis and have the tools and opportunities to do that. And then I think the final 2 slides are just some of the people that we work with. So happy to skip over that. And people love us. So if you want to work with us, and if you want to learn a little bit more, please ping me afterwards some contact details here.
Great, thank you, Chris. Appreciate you taking the time to introduce Sanctus to us. That was very, very interesting. So hi everyone, if you don't know me, I'm Ed Pryor. I'm a VP here at GP Bullhound, and I'm going to give us a whistle-stop tour over the final 3 trends, given we've got 8 minutes. So let's dive straight in. So the 8th trend this year is the future of work, specifically looking at the evolution of the collaboration and remote working. So I think this is one trend which we can all immediately relate to, given the fact we're hosting this over Zoom rather than usually presenting it in all the venues across the north. For almost all of us, the pandemic has forced a significant change on how we work and how we collaborate. For many people, it's worked out well. They're happy with their kind of new remote lives and a new readdressing of their work-life balance. However, on the contrary, there have also been plenty of people who have been struggling. So either due to poor connectivity, inadequate home setups, or finding themselves having to juggle a full-time job alongside learning how to be a teacher whilst looking after their own children. For these reasons, it's not really a surprise that cases of burnout have increased quite a lot. Organizations quickly had to work out the best way to manage people remotely in order not to reduce kind of productivity or motivation. And therefore, tools such as Slack and Zoom have seen phenomenal growth in the last 12 months and become the default to what would have previously been done either through a phone call or a meeting. I think it's fair to assume that Salesforce is forecasting a semi-permanent shift in working practices, given that they acquired Slack for almost $30 billion at the end of last year. As we look forward, there is hopefully an end in sight to the lockdowns which we've experienced, and organizations are reviewing their working policies to determine what post-lockdown working life will be like. And in fact, many of the larger tech organizations, including Facebook, Google, Twitter, they've come out and publicly stated that they'll be adopting this hybrid workplace model. And some of them have even said that they're going to be kind of cutting out the office completely and allow employees to work from home permanently. Before we move on to trend 9, I quickly wanted just to highlight a big change. Martin and the team over there in Leeds. So anyone that doesn't know, it's a remote mobile workforce management software company. We've known them for a number of years now. They've seen some phenomenal growth, and I just wanted to say congratulations because they raised over £75 million from Great Hill Partners a few weeks ago. So if you haven't already heard of them, I'm sure you will be hearing of them soon. Okay, let's go on to trend 9. So cash is no longer king. Now, I'm sure many people who are on the webinar have been using digital payments in one form or another for a number of years now, whether it's PayPal, digital banking, Apple Pay, Google Pay, and some of you may even remember that we've kind of discussed this at previous predictions events with GP Bullhound. However, there has been a tectonic shift towards NFC payments in recent months, partly driven by the pandemic, creating the need for a cashless society, but also the popularity of NFC payments with Gen Z. So over 75% of them, are using digital payment apps rather than cash, which is incredible. Our Swedish friends are winning the award for the highest adoption of NFC payments. They make currently on average over 550 cashless payments each year. And Sweden actually come out and said that they were predicting that they may be a cashless society as early as 2023, which is pretty incredible. We've also seen a growing number of big tech players entering the digital banking market in recent years, placing major bets in the space. In addition to the startups in the arena, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, they're all creating suites of products to cater to digital banking. We've also seen quite a bit of innovation in recent years. So kind of innovative point of sale financing solutions. So people are probably aware of Klarna, which is one of GP Bullhound's portfolio companies. They're creating new way for consumers to transact directly with brands, as well as the buy now, pay later mechanism that you probably see at till points. And finally, we've also noticed that many larger fintech players are adopting consolidation as one of their key strategies to gain competitive advantage and enter new markets. So, for instance, PayPal invested in Tink, which is a Swedish open banking platform. Fiserv acquired Bypass. This strategy helps companies in expanding their product offering by adding, a personalization component as well as upselling opportunities, which is where a lot of their growth will be coming over the next few years. A quick shout out to a local company, so Bottle Pay. So that's an exciting new startup coming out of Newcastle, facilitating micropayments within social networks and streaming services. So your Twitters, Reddit, Discord. They impressively announced a few weeks ago that they've raised an £11 million seed round, which is the largest seed round which has come out of the Northeast in a couple of years. So now let's move on to our final trend for this year. I want it now, e-commerce. So this one's twofold. So despite the initial kind of GDP concerns and macroeconomic worries at the beginning of the pandemic, we've witnessed in just a few short months the e-commerce market accelerating effectively 4 to 6 years over that same time period. You know, it's reflective of a paradigm shift towards e-commerce, which is happening anyway. Personally, I think one of the most interesting drivers of this trend is the demographic data, which is highlighted in the top left of the slide. So the pandemic's really opened an older generation's eyes to the benefits of e-commerce, and we are hopeful this adoption and usage will continue post the pandemic. PwC produced an interesting report on European shopping trends, and that found that almost 30% of European consumers who live in urban areas used online shopping as the main channel for buying groceries during the lockdown. And that was a 10% increase on pre-pandemic levels in just a couple of weeks, over the space of a few weeks. Another interesting trend along with that is for a number of years now, we've been able to order something online and receive it within 2 days of delivery for many items. You know, everyone's used to Amazon Prime. But what that's happened, what that has meant is that consumers now have come to expect this, and we're wanting instant gratification. So that's created the growth of a category called buy online and pick up in store, and that's absolutely skyrocketed by almost 300% over the last 12 months, which compared to just the total growth of year-on-year e-commerce sales of 40% is very impressive. And it's so popular now that 75% of the top 50 retailers in the US offer this service either in-store or designated pickup spots. So bringing all of this together, as more diverse groups of people begin to recognize the ease of searching and paying online, we're expecting the demographic shift to continue to grow for the foreseeable future. We're also expecting sustained demand for buying online, pickup in store in the post-pandemic economy as consumers have become comfortable and aware of the benefits of picking up in store. So that's it for this year. Apologies, I had to run through the last three pretty quickly. And given the time, I'm very sorry for those people that have been asking questions, but I don't think we're going to have time to field them. But before you go and drop off, I just wanted to say three more things. So next slide, please, Frenza. Firstly, thank you to Brandon and the rest of the team that wrote the report. So for those of you that don't know, at the beginning of Q3 each year, a blast goes around the entire bank asking for ideas, but then someone has to sculpt it and all our thoughts into a coherent report. So well done to the guys and girls that have done that. Secondly, thank you so much to our two guest speakers today for sharing their companies and their view on the insights. That was really helpful, and we appreciate you taking the time out to do that. And then finally, big drum roll perhaps, but I just wanted to announce that the Northern Tech Awards are back. Last year we had to take it virtual due to the pandemic, but this year we are going to be hopefully in person and live in Leeds in November, so we have had to push it back slightly. But most importantly, entries are open as at the 1st of June. So please do enter. Hopefully we'll be able to see you again in person very soon. All the details are available on the website, which is northerntechawards.com. But yeah, just one final thank you for joining, and hopefully we'll see you all soon.
Great, thanks, Ed. Just before everyone goes, we are happy to take a couple of questions. We've had a few come through during the session. We don't want people to go away without having their questions answered. So one question that came in, which I'll direct at Brandon, is that, you know, there's a tension between two of our trends. So the consumers taking control of privacy and MarTech going all in on the customer experience. The question is, do you think there'll ultimately be one winner?
Yeah, thank you, Gareth, for asking this question. It's a great question. And look, the short answer is the winner is the consumer. It just depends on the arc of time that we are looking at. So what we're seeing right now, and I think, Gareth, what you're referencing is sort of the pendulum swing from, hey, this really, great benefit oh, but wait a second, we're kind of losing out on privacy here. And I'll confess to have purchased multiple things on highly targeted Instagram ads that are still scary to me, but at the same time, I'm kind of grateful it's a product that I would not have otherwise discovered. So I think what we're going to see ultimately is that the consumer wins. It's just going to be kind of a back and forth on how we get there in terms of taking control of your privacy, as well as getting that personalized experience. And you can see from the demise of the third-party cookie, a lot of innovation and difference in thought is happening on this. But ultimately, the consumer is the winner in terms of getting a more personalized experience and more personalized product recommendations.
Great, thanks, Brandon. And one final question I'll pick up here from Chris Hunt is around there not being any mention of the green agenda in any of these top trends. And I think, Chris, the reason for that is because we've actually, and this is a great little plug, which I'm sure Friends is going to appreciate me for, is that we've actually got an entire webinar which is taking place over the coming weeks all around ESG investing, both in respect to net zero investments, but also broader social dynamics. So no doubt you'll be receiving some marketing materials from us with respect to that, and hopefully you'll be able to join us for that session as well. So with that, I'm conscious that we've taken over an hour of your time already. So again, on behalf of the whole team at GP Bullhound, I'd like to thank you for joining us for our tech predictions report. And hopefully by the time we come around again next year, we'll be able to do these presentations with you in person instead. So have a great afternoon and thanks for now.